Valerie Couch, please put the picture back on the wall immediately.
Good afternoon. I'm Kari Watkins, Executive Director of the Oklahoma City National Memorial Museum. Thank you so much for joining us today for this special collaborative Better Conversations session about healing through courageous kindness. Coming together to discuss this relevant topic, I hope today we can find common ground on this sacred ground. Joining me in studio is Bob Ross, Chair of the Memorial Foundation, Board of Trustees, and CEO of Inasmuch Foundation. Bob?
Thank you, Kari, for the opportunity to join you today. Our Better Conversations signature program has brought to light valuable conversations over the past 2 years, and it's important for our work to continue in this area. We thank the Kyle and Sarah Sweet family for sponsoring today's program. Kari, I thought it would be valuable if you'd share why this program began in 2020 during our 25th anniversary.
Well, many of you will remember in the aftermath of the bombing, amidst confusion, fear, heartbreak, people clung to one emotion: hope. It was that same hope that gave family members, survivors, first responders, and community members the strength to join together in conversation. People listened, they talked, they shared, and these countless hours of conversation ultimately led to the creation of the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum. And looking back now over 2 decades, we remember the value of bringing people together in conversation to gain different perspectives so that everyone is heard. Today, we're so pleased to have Mindy, Corporon, author of Healing a Shattered Soul, joining us in studio via Zoom. Mindy is an OU grad, so we're happy to have her here. But Mindy's father and her oldest son were murdered outside a Jewish community center in Overland Park, Kansas 7 years ago. Today, she'll share her personal experiences and how courageous kindness helped her in this healing journey. And then we'll spend the rest of the program with your questions, answering those. So if you would like to ask a question, please type it in the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can as time allows. With that, Mindy, welcome. We're so glad to have you here at the Oklahoma City National Memorial Museum. And we're anxious to hear your story and how you've moved through the past few years.
Hi, Kari. Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for having me on. This is it's a really nice opportunity to be able to share my story, specifically back in Oklahoma City. I actually lived in Oklahoma City as a young child until I was about, I was born until I was 4. I lived in Oklahoma City. And then, yes, I was an OU grad. So there's several familiar faces starting to join the call, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So you want me to go ahead and get started?
That'd be great.
Okay. What I'd like to start with is let all the audience members know that everything that I do today, everything that I do surrounding friends and family and work life, volunteering, anything and everything I do stems from what happened to me on April 13th, 2014. So I've written a book. That's what you're gracious enough to talk about, Healing a Shattered Soul. And I've opened a new company. I left a previous company that I thought I would be with forever. And I left that company in 2018. And I opened a new company called Workplace Healing. It's focused on healing. I opened a foundation with a few of my family members and caring community members. And my life is full of purpose right now. My life is full of love and joy, but it also has sadness that's weaved in. The sadness will always be there. And I've learned to live with that. I think that people who experience significant trauma, perhaps specifically losing a child, that's what I have, is losing a child and my father at the same time. So when I tell a story and you see the picture on my book, I want you to know that the smile and the courageous kindness came from the aftermath of what happened on April 13th. So for those audience members who are not aware, I was living in Overland Park, Kansas. I had left the University of Oklahoma right after graduating, and I made my home in the Kansas City area. And in 2014, I was married and had 2 boys, and they were 14 and 12, Reet, R-E-A-T, and Lucas, and married to my still current husband, Len. And actually on April 12th, we were at our family home with my mom and dad, and the decision was made that my dad would drive Reet to a singing competition at the Jewish Community Center. So we're not Jewish, we happen to be Christian, but the Jewish Community Center is for everyone. The Jewish Community Center is for everyone to attend and do anything. You know, there's a sporting, theater, tennis, golf, everything, baseball. So the Jewish Community Center was a community center, and he had an audition that afternoon. And so my dad agreed to take him to that audition and that competition. Next day, on April 13th, I left home, or was planning to leave home and go to Lucas's lacrosse game. The reason that these specific instances are so important is because the steps that were put into place really led me to looking into how do we hear what's going on in our lives, what happens in our lives, and are we paying attention? And so many times we're not paying attention. We're just walking through the day and doing, you know, what we think we're supposed to do. And what I was doing is I was getting ready to leave for a lacrosse game. Our younger son Lucas had a lacrosse game, and I had the opportunity to hear Reet sing 2 songs that he was going to sing in the competition. He sang "On the Street Where You Live" by from My Fair Lady, and then he sang the song "You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone." These were the 2 songs he was planning on singing for the competition. My dad walked through the door. He and I had some chit chat. We talked just about what was going to happen the rest of the day, how we were going to meet at church that evening. April 13th, 2014 was Palm Sunday, and we were planning on gathering as a family for church and then having dinner together as a family. And when I say as a family, I mean my younger brother had moved there, so he lived close with his wife and 2 kids, and my parents lived there. So we had all moved from Oklahoma up into the Overland Park area. So this was our plan for the evening, and he and I were just lightly discussing that. Reet hollered to me and said, "Mom, you're going to be late for Lucas's lacrosse game." So I grabbed my keys and my purse, and I was walking out the door. And as I was about to leave, I took a step back and I looked at Reet. I leaned in and gave him a kiss on the cheek. And I said, "Good luck, I love you." And he said, "I love you too." And I left, and those were the last words that I would ever hear him say to me. He said, "I love you too, Mom." I drove to the lacrosse game. It's about 25-minute drive from my house. It's actually past the Jewish Community Center. So I drove past the Jewish Community Center to the lacrosse game. And when I got there, it had been canceled. I was in the parking lot. I was about to walk into the stadium, and another mom was walking out, and she said the game had been canceled. Very quickly, I saw my husband, Lynn, and son, Lucas, and he was disappointed to have his game canceled. I was there to watch it, and his dad was there, and it was canceled. And I said, "I'm going to go to the J and see the audition. I know I'm going to get there on time," because they were coinciding, but I knew I'd make it there before he would compete. I got in my car and I headed that way. It was about a 15 to 18-minute drive. And as I pulled into the Jewish Community Center, this is when tragedy started to unfold for me. It was mostly an empty lot, but far down in the parking lot, right outside of the White Theater, was my dad's truck. And next to my dad's truck was my dad's body. So I found my father and then subsequently Reet before the ambulance had been, I think the ambulance had been called, and the fire trucks, the EMTs, they had been called, but because it was a live shooter, they were on standby. And so when I arrived, there were no police there yet. I saw my dad's body and was, of course, immediately in shock. And I stopped my car very quickly, fairly close to where they were. I ran to my dad, screaming by now, what happened, to no one. There was no one there, no one that I could see. I didn't hear anything. There was just, the breeze was on me. It was cool. And my dad was motionless. I got very close to him and I wanted to help him, but it was very apparent, unfortunately, that he was already deceased. I could see that there was nothing that I could do for him visually. I kept wanting to walk toward him, but I felt a pushback, and I heard the words, "Your Father's in heaven, go find Reed." It was really clear and powerful and frightening all at the same time. And I walked around to my right, around my dad's truck, not really noticing that I was hearing any voices. And there were two men holding my son in their arms. And this is how our lives were shattered. A man had come in to the J, and then he murdered my dad on contact, and he shot Reed through the truck. And then he shot up the J. When I walked over and toward the building, there was glass shattered everywhere. The truck was shattered. Everything was shattered. There was glass all over the place. And then he left the scene shooting at other people on the way out of the parking lot. And he went to Village Shalom, which was on the same thoroughfare. It was on the same street. And Village Shalom is a retirement center. And he went there to murder Jews. That's what he told us during the trial. And he murdered Terry Lamano. He shot at 3 people there, murdering 1 more. So my dad, William Corporon, and my son, Reed Underwood, were the first 2 to lose their lives. And then Terry Lamano was the 3rd. The man who did this was a white supremacist. The man who did this planned it. It was premeditated. He was evil. He never had any remorse, ever. We were face to face with him when we were in the courtroom. We had, I shouldn't say we had the opportunity. We took the opportunity to be there on 3 occasions. I didn't want to be there anymore because I didn't want to hear any more from him during the court hearings. Obviously, he was caught. He was caught very quickly. He was tried, and he was sentenced to death row. So the 3 occasions that we were at the courthouse were to hear the verdict, to offer our victim statements, and then to hear the sentencing. And in all 3 opportunities when we were there, he never looked us in the eye, and he never had any remorse. Even in speaking to the judge and in representing himself, he never had any remorse. So the state of Kansas had the death penalty available, and he was put on death row. Fast forward now, which was not easy to do at all. We did not fast forward in any way, shape, or form. But fast forward to today, I published Healing a Shattered Soul on May 3rd, 2021. And the perpetrator, the man who murdered them, died on May 3rd, 2021 in prison. So I launched the book and he died, and someone might look at that and say, you know, that's justice. That's karma. I'm not sure I have a name for it. I just know that I'm really thankful that he's not out there talking to people any longer. And we put him away, and he wasn't talking to people, but he was about to appeal. He had the opportunity, because on death row, the legal process is to have the opportunity to appeal. So I want to touch on just very briefly and just let you know that our second son, Lucas, was 12 at the time. And the mental health issues that he suffered through for the first 2 years were significant. We were in crisis mode and didn't even know it the first year. And then we knew, and then the second year, and then into the third. In 2018, 4 years after the murders, we needed to move. And so we left Kansas City, we left the Overland Park area, and we moved to Florida and restarted our lives here. I'm still very much involved in the Kansas City community. Everything that I do revolves around Central Time. I'm always getting confused about what time something's starting because I'm on Eastern, but everybody I deal with is on Central Time. Again, we've learned to carry the loss. We've learned that we're always in a healing process. That's why the book is named Healing a Shattered Soul, not Healed. I know I carry a hole in my heart, and some days I do better than others. And but that's my story of how I came to be here and why I wrote the book Healing a Shattered Soul.
Wow.
Powerful. Mindy, you talked about in the book, referring to the shooter, you say the hate he exploded on our family, shattering numerous lives, would always be a part of your journey, but not your focus. Can you go in more to the courageous kindness that you referred to?
Absolutely. So I wasn't the person that was courageously kind originally. I mean, I think some people might think that I named that for myself, and actually, it was everything that everyone did for us. And that's what I try to portray in the book is that we could hardly breathe and eat and do anything. And so people came alongside us and they breathed life back into us. Not focusing on the perpetrator is literally just that. I have learned to say out loud that I forgave him. Now, that doesn't mean that what he did was not wrong. It was heinously wrong. What he did was evil and what he did was wrong. But I don't hold hate for him. I don't say his name. His name is not written anywhere in the book. It's not ever mentioned. I don't mention his name, and frequently I'm happy that I forget it. But we don't focus on him. We always focused on the kindness that my dad and Reet and Terry Lamano gave to us and gave to humanity. They were all three wonderful individuals. My dad was a physician and Terry Lamano was a nurse. I mean, they were two great people who were still working in the community and offering life and love and healthcare and giving to other people, and their lives were just left out. And Reed, 14, I mean, he was just a rising superstar at the time. So we choose to not focus on him. We hurt often, and we hurt at, now after 7 years, we hurt at kind of particular times. But for the first 4 years, I had to find something to pour into. And so I poured into opening a foundation, which is now named 7 Days. And then, pouring into my family and making the choice along with my husband to move to Florida and work on healing our unit and our family.
Wow, Mindy, that was an incredible story. And of course, my mind immediately goes to my son, who's is just turned 13, so is 12, and Lucas's age at that time. It just is really tough to hear, but thank you so much for sharing with us today. You described your story as a journey of courageous kindness, and clearly you are courageous and kind. In Oklahoma, we have a statewide initiative that is centered around service, honor, kindness. We call it the Oklahoma Standard, and it's a continued effort to encourage a culture of courage and kindness. What are some ways for others to join you on that journey?
Yeah, let's talk about what courageous kindness means, what I think it means. I mean, sometimes we don't want to be kind, when someone cuts you off in traffic, sometimes it's not the first thing you think of to say, oh, maybe they're on their way to an emergency room visit. Sometimes that is not the first thing we think of. Or, if somebody spilled a plate of food on you, or I actually had someone spill a whole tray full of waters on me one time. And, after the cold hit me and I thought for a second, the kind thing to do is obviously not to yell at them, but the courageous kind thing to do is to, stand up and look at them in the face and say, mistakes are made. It's okay. I'm going to be okay. So to be courageously kind is to walk through something that you may not want to walk through. You may see a homeless person that you don't know what to do for them. And I try to keep waters in my car just to be able to give them water. It may be somebody in line in front of you who they're looking through their pocketbook and they realize that they can't maybe pay for all their groceries. Maybe they put too many things on the grocery line. And so that courageous kindness is to look at the bill and offer to pay it, or just pay it. Courageous kindness is remembering when a friend of yours or a family member lost a loved one, and then reaching out to them on holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries of that death. Those are steps that are courageous kindness. If you know someone, if you're really close to someone and they have a tragedy happen, step in and help breathe life into their family. That's what people did for us. They walked our dog. We had food for 3 months, but then show up later, show up in 6 months and show up in 9 months and show up a year later. Those are really courageous kindness acts. And frequently we're worried about stepping on someone's toes or getting in someone's business. And it's okay to ask the question. It's okay to say, I'm thinking I need to come and visit you. Can I come over? may I come over? It's okay to engage with people. And it's also okay to say a deceased person's name. And you can always ask permission first. But when people say Reed's name or my dad's name, I always smile when I say it. And because they bring me so much joy and so much love. And I think we need to start talking more about the grief that now we've all experienced with COVID, whether we lost a loved one or lost a job. We certainly lost a lot of time, and we lost a way of life. And it's really courageous of us to have conversations about that.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to remind the audience, if you're viewing, if you have a question for Mindy, just to put that in the chat line and send that in, and we'll answer those. Your son Lucas came up with a very clever way to make you and your husband laugh after so much sadness. Can you tell us a little bit about what he does?
Yes, Lucas won't watch a movie unless it's a comedy. And so, I didn't want to smile at the time that this was going on. He was 12, and we were all three grieving very differently in our own home. So I want to make sure and let people know that everyone grieves differently. We all three had the exact same thing happen to us, and none of us grieved the same way. Lucas wanted to hear us laugh. He wanted to hear his dad laugh. He wanted to hear me laugh, and I didn't want to smile. It was really hard. But I was a counselor, and she said, you need to gather together and do what he wants to do. So we would get together. I've seen every Will Ferrell movie like 10 times. I mean, I know them all. And Lucas loves them. And still to this day, when we say, hey, let's watch a movie, it's really hard to get him to watch anything that it's either, gruesome stuff that I don't want to watch, or it's some comedy that I've already seen 100 times. So, he was very intuitive at the age of 12. He didn't know how to say, Mom, I need to hear you laugh. And he didn't know how to say to his dad, I want to spend time with you and sit with you. He just said, can we watch a movie? And then it was always a comedy. And so we need to listen, to children when they're involved in trauma, because he knew what he needed, and he was guiding us into a healing process as well. Just so you know, he's 19, he's thriving. He's at the University of Arkansas. I'm very happy for him. Of course, I was hoping for the University of Oklahoma, but he's at the University of Arkansas, where he needs to be, and loving it. So he's doing really, really well.
Great. Well, we've got plenty of folks out there joining us today as part of our virtual audience. So we'd really like to take a question from one of our online audience members or someone on the wall. And so if you're on the wall, you can unmute and ask away, or raise your hand on the wall, and we can call on you. But who out there's got a question to kick us off?
Kristen Peck does.
Okay, Kristen, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. And Mindy, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. So there are, we all know people who are grieving about different things that are taking place in their lives. And, even when you get around the holidays, there's just a lot of people, COVID, everything, that struggle with certain things that are going on. Can you talk a little bit about the turning point for you from when you were in that space where you didn't want to laugh to when you were able to laugh again without forcing it for your son? And what advice do you have for us as we're helping others who may be grieving, and how can we tell, what stage of grief somebody is in, so that we can, appropriately reach out and help them through it?
Yeah, Kristen, that's a great question. And interestingly enough, I know exactly when it happened. They were murdered in April, and in September, there was a weekend in September that my husband and I already had planned to go to Nashville for the weekend. And he wanted me to go, and we went with another couple. And so we went. Lucas stayed, my brother and sister-in-law. So we went to Nashville, and we were, going from place to place, and Don't Stop Believing by Journey came on in Nashville. And I started like dancing and kind of laughing. And then I just broke it down into sobs. And that was the turning point when I realized that I could find joy again. And it scared me because I didn't think I would find it. And I was, I felt guilty about finding it because my dad would never find joy and Reet would never find joy. And it's so hard to think about that. But I started feeling it at 6 months because it was kind of there and big and loud. And I remember Nikki Neal was with me and she came over because she could tell all of a sudden I went from kind of dancing and laughing to I'm crying. And I just said, I wasn't ready for that emotion to show up. So I started learning that it could show up and allowing it to show up more. And you can hold it hand in hand. I can cry in sadness and laugh in joy at exactly the same thing and for the same amount of time. At the same time, there was one other story that was real early on when we went to clean out Reet's locker. Other people offered to clean out his locker. And I said, no, we will clean out his locker. And from the moment I got out of the car, I was just tears were just flowing. And I felt sorry for our principal, Scott Bacon, because, here I am walking in, I'm just a crying mess. And we walked in and the school was just decorated with posters all about loving Reet and loving one another and helping each other. And it was so beautiful. There were red hearts everywhere. And so that was helpful, but tears were flowing and we got to his locker. And I didn't realize this, but kids really don't have to have that much in their locker anymore. So there wasn't a lot in his locker, but they're just messy. He's a 14 boy. And we reached up on that top shelf and I reached up and I pulled 2 things down and there were 2 checks that he was supposed to have turned in months ago. And I started laughing and it wasn't a joy, but it was a laugh. It was a laugh with Reet. We didn't have a sign in our yard that said he was in debate because he hadn't turned in the check. And I'd been asking the school, where's the sign? Well, we need the check. I'm like, well, he says he turned in the check. And then I went to his locker and there it was. And so those things, I'm like, well, that was Reet. That's him. He got it to school and he got it to his locker, but he didn't get it to them. So I wouldn't have called that joy, but remembering them brings me, laughter and brings me joy. But it was, to answer your question very specifically, it was 6 months. It came upon me and I realized that I needed to learn to carry it with me.
Mindy, I have a question for you. When you talk about the Jewish community and that your boys use the community center, how did that relationship evolve after the shooting and how did you handle the white supremacists? And how does that still balance out in your world today? We see so much of it around us.
Yeah, well, I'll just frankly state that there are white supremacists. They are there. They are among us. They live on our streets. They live in our neighborhoods. They're there, and we need to be aware of that. We need to be present. We need to be present not only for our own health and ourselves, just in general in life, and we need to be present for our families. But we need to be present when we're out and about and we see something happen that looks, not right, or someone says something that's not right. We've gone through this whole stage of, oh, that's happening over there, I don't want to get involved. And I understand, if you or I don't feel comfortable in a situation and I don't feel like I should put myself in it, I can always call for help. But we just need to be present and pay attention to what's going on. Specific to the J, so the JKC, I'm very close with them. I'm very close with the JKC. So they hosted a vigil that I was not able to attend. I attended a vigil the night of the murders, and but then they had a vigil as well, and I wasn't able to attend that. But they have been extremely supportive. We have a shared fund called Reet's Rising Stars Fund. So because Reet was murdered on his way to audition for a superstar event that was the fundraiser for the J, we created a joint fund and they put money into that every year. And then that money is for interfaith dialogue. It helps support interfaith understanding and interfaith dialogue that my foundation and the J, we collaborate. And then it also helps artists, performing artists that are involved with the J. So we've helped put students in camps, summer camps, fall camps. We've bought dance clothes, vocal lessons, all those things that that I know students would really appreciate. And my dad was theatrical. My dad and Reet would appreciate. So we are very closely tied. They help sponsor our activities every year. And, you know, if they called me, I would act on something. And if I call them, they're like, yes, you know, what do you need? So we're definitely very close. I've never blamed them. I never blamed Judaism or Jewishness. I did dive very deeply. If you read the book, you'll read several chapters about faith. And there's a chapter called Jews Don't Talk About Jesus. And then there's a chapter called Islam or Muslim, because there was a period of life and still where Islam is important in my life, as well as many other faiths. So to answer your question, then I'm very close with them and close with many people from all different walks of faiths and religions and non-religions.
That's so important.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to try to go back up on the board? Is
Sure.
there anyone out there on the board zooming in here that wants to ask a question?
Hi, Mindy. As someone, this is Lily Beth, if you don't mind. As someone who's known you for a very long time, it has been amazing to watch you through all of this, and you've shown so much grace and so much, I guess, grace throughout this whole process as people were supporting you. And I watched, you've talked about your faith. Is your faith called Faith Always Wins? Your foundation called Faith Always Wins?
Our foundation board changed our name in October. Not that you would know that. So it was Faith Always Wins. The board was named Faith Always Wins. And as of October 2021, it's now called 7 Days.
Okay. So what is the 7 days?
Yeah. So what we do is we promote kindness and understanding through education and dialogue. We're doing the same thing that Faith Always Wins was doing, but for several reasons, we felt like specifically in our community, 7 Days has become a really wonderful brand. It's an activity that happens in April specifically, and there's 7 themes: love, discover, others, connect, you, go, and onward. And so these themes they have resources attached to each day, each themed day, and we're creating resources for K through 12 educators to hand them and put them in the schools. You know, we all say as adults, oh, the younger generation is who's going to change the world. Well, they're not going to change the world into a way of kindness unless we actually teach them how to change it into kindness. So we're working on a specific kindness resources that go into K through 12. So that's what 7 Days does. We do work year round. We have a kindness youth leadership program. It's a mentoring program for high school youth. And they help us, they learn about volunteering, philanthropy, putting events together. We mentor them on interviewing. They do interviews on behalf of us. So we are a youth education program around educating on kindness and understanding.
That's what I was going to ask you to expand on. So that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily Beth.
You all went to OU together, right?
Lily Beth and I are Tri Delta sisters from the University of Oklahoma.
Nice. Okay, great.
Yes. So it's great to see you, Mindy.
Thank you.
Love
Good
that.
to see you.
That's wonderful. Any other questions from our wall?
I have a question and comment. One of the things that oftentimes happen with adults as they are grieving, there's a possibility that they forget the children are grieving. And you touched on this, and I commend you for bringing your younger child along with you and recognizing the grief that was occurring. I had an experience where I was so involved in my grief that I was not aware that my grandson was also grieving. And it was not until it was dealt with academics that he sat at the table crying and said, I'm also grieving. So help us, what is your recommendation to those of us in terms of observing our youth and being aware that they too grieve?
Yeah, Gloria, I think you just said what it is, that we need to be aware that they're grieving. What's interesting is Lucas didn't want to talk about it. Lucas didn't want me to mention Reed's name for an entire year. Every time I mentioned Reed's name, he almost would get mad at me. So Lucas handled grief so differently from me. He handled it with anger, and it made it very difficult for the two of us because he would get angry. And so it was hard for me to be around him. I mean, I was with him, I was parenting him and his mother, but he became suicidal. So similar to when your grandson, it sounds like, was at the table crying, and you finally see this visible reaction, and you're like, oh, we got a phone call from the high school saying your son is suicidal, he has a plan. And so we immediately got him into care. You know, what I would say is, when we're the adult and we're in it and we're grieving so much, that's when our friends can really step in and be a friend to our children and walk alongside us. Obviously, you want to make sure that they're safe people around the kids, especially if they're minors. We had a great network of people who took Lucas to school and held his hand when he did. They took him to movies. They helped him go play golf because I was struggling to function. And that all happens really fast. Everyone, when a bad thing happens, everyone just goes, whoosh, what can I do right now? Oh my gosh, right now. Well, let me tell you, my dad and Reed are dead, and they still are dead. And I know sometimes they're like, I can't believe she said that. Well, it's true. They're not coming back. So a year later, 9 months later, a year later, 18 months later, you can still help. You can still say, how is Lucas doing? Or how is Gloria's grandson doing? Maybe I should take him to a movie, or maybe I should see if he's in a youth group. That's what I would say is, don't forget about the families that have lost someone. It's the months down the road when we're alone with our own feelings, and we're alone with our family members who aren't grieving like we are, and we're trying to figure out the next path. That's really when, if you want to show your courageous kindness, step up then and step into their family and go help at that point. But you know, Gloria, I understand how you didn't know when you were grieving what you were grieving. I didn't understand how desperately Lucas was grieving. He was suicidal 2 different times. And the second time we thought we were paying attention. The second time we thought we were on it. You know, teenagers, they're tough. And so just be really listen. And when they say that they're upset or they say they're sad, you just got to pay attention to them and get all the help you can get. I had a couple of times when I had to call friends and say, I need your help. I need help with Lucas. I need you to be here with me, with him. And they did. They showed up and helped us.
That's great insight. With the past 22 months of a pandemic, many of us have experienced grief in different ways. Can we talk a little bit about that? The grief in the workplace, you know? What kinds of things can employers or fellow employees do to be helpful to someone who has suffered a significant loss during this pandemic?
Yes, Bob, thanks. That's like a great tee up to my new company. And maybe you all did that on purpose, which would be very nice. I don't know. So in 2017, I was leaving a firm that I had co-founded. I was a wealth management firm, and it was my career. I started a career in wealth management. I worked my way up, worked my tail off, opened a company, and loved it. And I expected that was going to be my lifelong career. I expected that one or both of my kids might come and work the firm. I mean, the whole thing was, ready and planned, and what happens to plans. So I needed to leave in 2017. And when I was leaving the wealth management firm, I realized that I had this unfortunate new skill set, which helped me be able to understand how it might help other CEOs, managers, and care teams to reintegrate an employee. Because my team did what they could, but I was the CEO. We were a small firm of 11, and I was the person that they would have looked to help anybody else. But I was the one that was so shattered and broken. And so as I left the firm, I started hearing other people start asking me questions. How did your team handle, et cetera, et cetera. So I grabbed another co-founder in 2018, and we opened Workplace Healing. And to be very specific, employers and employees, team members, but specifically managers who have ability to make decisions on behalf of an employee, they need to be more empathetic and pay attention. I grieved for a year. 7 years. I'm still grieving. There are certain days when I wake up and I'm like, I need an emotional break. I need a mental health day. But early on in the first year, I was really, really foggy the first year. My brain was not operating correctly. You can look up all the research that you want. Your brain changes when you experience a big trauma. And so as an employer, when you want that employee back, that is not the question that you ask them. You don't say, when are you coming back? You ask, how are you right now? How can I help you right now? I also don't recommend that you say, take all the time you need. It sounds really good, doesn't it? We just want to say, oh, take all the time you need. But as an employer, talking to an employee, you're really not in the same space, especially when your employee is grieving anything. So you want to have a conversation, and we call it an ABLE conversation. Ask, believe, listen, encourage. So ask questions. You have the ability to ask questions, and it's okay to ask some now COVID personal questions and say, how can I help you at home? Are you getting enough sleep? Is there anything you need for food? So as an employer, what can you do to help? And then ask leading questions to get your employee talking to you about what is going on. And if they had like a best friend at work, have that best friend be your liaison. Maybe they're not super close with you, the boss or the manager, but they have a friend in the company. Have them be the liaison and make sure you know what's going on. You want to stay connected to them. Employee assistance programs are wonderful and they offer so much, but there's a stigma about using them. And so as an employer or a manager, if you can encourage your employee to have conversations with you and be empathetic and listen to them and what their needs are, and offer them a plan. We call it building a human recovery plan. And what you're doing is you're setting out specific tactics that you're going to do that are going to be heartfelt and head-based. You're going to talk to them about, project management. It's okay to have ask that question, not in the first week or two, not early, but within about 2.5 weeks, you need to have a work conversation, because that person is still your employee. They're still valuable. They still want to be valuable. They don't want to feel like, oh, they've had this trauma and you're going to throw them away. So they want you to let them know that they're needed. But just have some really nice conversations with them, build a human recovery plan for them, and help them with head-based tactics and heart-based tactics. And the heart tactics are mowing the lawn, walking the dog, making sure that their family has the food that they need. Those types of tactics. And then the head-based tactics are, have they seen the EAP? Have they been in contact with human resources? And who's handling project management? Because the company does need to run, and every employee knows that. They just want to be acknowledged. And sometimes that's what we're afraid to do. So step into acknowledging them with empathy.
Those are some great tips. Thank you very much.
Fabulous.
Anybody else on the wall that would like to ask a question?
Yes, I would. Mike Cornblit. You mentioned early on about the issue with Lucas and the mental health issue. We just recently had a shooting in Michigan with young people. Do you think we're doing enough in the country to deal with the issue of mental health, especially with young people when they experience those kind of traumas?
So Mike, I understand your question, and I really suffered that day. So I have a visceral reaction when shootings like that happen. So I'm very well aware of what happened. When you say, are we doing enough in the country? I don't know. I can't really answer that question in a broad spectrum. I can't answer that very well. What I would say is, in our own communities and in a community when that happens, or even before that happens, we have to make sure that mental health care is available to everyone. Now, what happened after a shooting in Olathe, Kansas? So 2 years after Dad and Reed and Terry were murdered, another man came into Olathe and he shot 3 people, murdering 1. And the person who was murdered was a Garmin employee. And Garmin made mental health care available. and no one went in to use it. No one walked in. Now, Mike, I'm talking about adult, so give me a second, but nobody went in. It was a stigma to say that they needed help. And there had just been, their coworker had been murdered, and no one went in and said they needed help. So I think that mental health needs to be available to everyone, and in maybe different ways. Maybe not. Lucas used to say, "Oh, I'm going to the suicide doctor," because he had said he was going to commit suicide. Then every time he went, they had to ask him questions. Are you going to hurt yourself? Are you going to harm someone else? Do you have a plan? They have a checklist. Well, after a period of time, a 13-year-old's like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to see a suicide doctor. I mean, he dubbed it that. So some things need to change a little bit, but we had access to mental health care. And my issue is if people don't have access. So people need to have access, but then once they have access, we need to understand as a population, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I can't think straight right now. Like I need to go journal or cry for 15 minutes and then you'll have me back. Because we don't admit that we're hurting. We don't admit that we're foggy. I mean, the last thing I wanted to walk in and say was, yeah, I know I'm the CEO of a wealth management firm, but I can't do math right now. But I had to admit that because a client came in and they wanted me to do the client appointment. I had to leave the client appointment. I couldn't do it. I could not handle it. I created the company. I knew the plan. I knew everything, but I couldn't handle it. And I was literally lucky enough to be in a situation where I had confidence in saying, I can't do it. But that's not the way for everybody. We have to make a path for people to say, I don't have a broken arm, but I have a bruised head or I have a broken heart. And that's where I think we need help. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't really speak to, national policy or this or that, but locally in the community, I mean, as volunteers, we can step up, we can be available. I wrote a few things out and posted them on what people could do for the Michigan students. In January, when they come back, they need support. In January, when all those students come back, in January, when the students go back and the families who lost children, when their children don't go back, that's horrible. That's a horrible time. When Reach should have been a sophomore and I couldn't take him to school, it was horrific. So we just need to keep making ourselves available for people, and we need to be okay, find a safe group to be with and be vulnerable, and find the help when we need it, and be a model for those around us that we're okay looking for mental health care.
Our Oklahoma City National Memorial Foundation is focused each day on finding common ground on what we call sacred ground, so that what occurred in April of 1995 in Oklahoma City or April of 2014 in Overland Park, Kansas does not happen again. What are your suggestions of the conversations we can have in our workplace, at home, or in our communities?
Yes, thank you. We need to know one another better. We need to stop not knowing who we are. We need to understand one another better. So I would suggest that you do get to know your coworkers as well as you can. What faith are they? What holidays do they celebrate or not celebrate? What faith are they, are they not? Are they agnostic? Are they atheist? Are they pagan, Buddhist, Hindu? Have a curious conversation, not a judgmental conversation. In our 7 days, we give people the opportunity to discover. So on Discover Day, so if all of you adopted 7 days, then on Discover Day, hey, everybody, we're going to discover a new country, a new region, a new religion, a new culture. What is something that your team members want to know about, and have people do research on it, or maybe pick 3 things. So find the opportunity to discover one another. So I grew up in Marlow, Oklahoma. Raise your hand if you've heard of Marlow, Oklahoma. Okay, see, thank you. Okay, I grew up in Marlow and I loved it. I loved growing up in Marlow. It was all white. It was all white people. I grew up a white girl in a white town. And I didn't know any Jewish people until I went to Kansas City. Well, that's not true. I knew Jennifer, who married a Jewish man in college. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't understand that. So I learned about Judaism, and then I learned about Islam as an adult. wouldn't it be awesome? And I think it is happening if we engage our youth and ourselves in learning about other people now and not being afraid that they're going to take over, that they're going to, they're going to take over the banks, they're going to take over the media, they're going to take over. They don't have to take over if we personally don't let them take over. We own ourselves. We have our own lives and our own paths, and we don't have to let people take over. What we can do is be friends with them and find out what they have to offer us and maybe what we have to offer them. And that's just, knowing one another and being genuine. But I'm not going to be so Pollyanna to say that white supremacy is not there. It is. There's evil in our world, and we need to keep our eyes open to that. We just have to pay attention. I've seen evil. He sat next to me. He was 2 feet away, and he was never remorseful. And those people are still out there, and those people are not on this call right now, but when you see it happen, if you know what's going to happen, if you know people are talking about something that's negative or detrimental, you have to speak up and be a model in your own area, wherever you are. If it's, philanthropy, your workplace, model that you are open to knowing people who are not like you. And that will spread courageous kindness.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Mindy. I think as we approach the holidays, is there one last tip you want to leave us as people deal with grief and deal with loss as we get through these tough holidays?
So this may not be what you were expecting, but for someone who's lost a family member, and I will speak from losing a child, the holidays suck. They just do. They just are really, really hard. So if you know that someone's lost a family member, go ahead and buy them that coffee. Get them a wreath for their door. Depending on how early it is, people decorated my door. Every holiday is difficult. I start getting anxious, then I get angry. So just know when people lose a family member, their whole family dynamic changes, and there's someone not sitting at the table that should be sitting at the table. And it's really hard. So if someone's now alone, if you know someone and now they're alone, like their children are somewhere else, or maybe they didn't have children, or if they're alone, invite them over, have them over and have them at your table. They want company. I quit listening to holiday music for 4 years. I didn't wear eye makeup or listen to holiday music for 4 years. I cried all the time, and I listened to sports because I didn't want to hear holiday music. So just be aware of that. But I love it that somebody came and decorated my door. I mean, a simple wreath or a poinsettia or a note saying, I'm thinking about you. And if you have extra room and they need a place, invite them, or, invite them to your service or invite them to your home and let them know. And then when they get back, don't ask them about it. Just go into the new year. That's what I like to do. So it's still difficult. I'm present for Lucas, and I'm present for Lynn, and I try to get other people around me who are joyful. But it's a difficult thing to know that Reet would be 22 and he would have graduated college, and we'd be looking at, what would he be doing now? And there's just so much life lost. And that's what we all need to be paying attention to, is being present for those who are in that same situation. I just really appreciate you all having me today. Thank you.
So many similarities between your story and what we've learned here in Oklahoma City, and what everyone goes through with personal loss. And so thank you for your candor and sharing that with us today. And thank you to all of you for joining us and taking part in these important conversations. Through the teaching of our museum exhibits, online educational programs, ongoing discussion, and on this sacred ground, we must continue to find common ground. We did that today. You can join us by visiting our memorial and museum, or by taking part in our Better Conversation series that will resume actually on June 6th, discussing freedom of speech on the first anniversary of the insurrection in the United States Capitol. What is our job as we move forward?
Join us Saturday, January 29th for a free workshop featuring Ronald White and details from his latest book, Abraham Lincoln, Wisdom for Today. Go online to memorialmuseum.com to register for this workshop. I hope you can find time to visit the memorial over the holidays, and if you have family and friends in from out of town, please bring them to experience the Memorial Museum firsthand. The outdoor memorial is open every day, and the museum is open with the exception of Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's Day.
As you gather with loved ones this holiday season, Use questions from our specially designed holiday cards to start a better conversation. These questions will help reflect on many challenges we have faced and what we are grateful for, and for our hopes for the future. Go to memorialmuseum.com/Better Conversations for the holiday edition of these Better Conversation cards, or stop by our store and pick up a deck today free with any purchase. But as your family and friends gather in the weeks ahead, I hope you'll take what you have learned in today's conversation and the impactful words Mindy has given us to help find courageous kindness and help others through their healing. We're so grateful for you, Mindy, for sharing your story today, and thanks for all of you joining us online. Have a happy and blessed holiday season.